Okay, what's up? What's up? Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Music, and today I wanted to talk about the imagination. Okay, so this is the fifth step in the book Think and Grow Rich. Let me double check, make sure it is the fifth. So last week we just finished up talking about specialized knowledge, and I'm really excited for this chapter because like it's the imagination. This is truly the part of the mind where all ideas are limitless, right? There's no end to the imagination. And so there was some interesting ideas I found in this section of the book. We're probably going to do maybe a two-parter on this because I really want to dive deep into the weeds with this book. I'm probably going to just read a paragraph and break it down for you because it goes really in depth, and I don't want to just glance over anything with this chapter. Okay, so he says this is chapter 6, the imagination, the workshop of the mind. Okay, but it is the fifth step toward riches. And he says the imagination is literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. Okay, pause there. This is the part of the philosophy where we're actually going to develop the plans to get rich. Okay. Now, this is key because, you know, I think throughout this book, he might not say this word for word, but he says, it's not, you're not going to get rich unless you have sound, definite plans backed by, persistent action. Okay. So until we actually develop the right plan to get the goal that we had written down, right, we're not going to get anywhere. And how do you create the plan? Well, that's where, the imagination comes into play. And so, a lot of people, a lot of the successful people will probably tell you that their first plan really didn't work out. But the thing is, the idea of this chapter, we'll get into. I'm getting really ahead of myself here just from the first sentence, but the idea here is that through persistently, making a plan, putting it into action, revising that plan, and combining this idea with persistent action, right? This is, where it almost becomes guaranteed that you will become rich. So let me keep reading. He says the impulse, the desire is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. Okay, now, we're talking about transmuting energy into matter, right? We're doing something, and I'll talk about this more in depth, but what is, the idea of what it is that you want? Like, that thought impulse of what you want is just energy at this point. It's just an idea in your head, right? I want this, right? It's something that is invisible to everyone else. Now, the idea is that we want to make it real. We want to turn it into the physical world, the material form. And he says that the desire, the impulse of desire is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. So we are given this idea that is purely just energy, shape, form, and action through the aid of our imagination. Right? This is the part in between where we come up with what it is that we want and we start making it real. Okay, this is a really critical step. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Through the aid of his imaginative faculty, man has discovered and harnessed more of nature's forces during the past 50 years than during the entire history of the human race previous to that time. Right? He talks about how he's conquered air. Think about it. At one point, when this book was written, this is way back when, before the internet even started. Think about how much we've accomplished. Right? He's talking about how, you know, we've been able to analyze the sun from a distance millions of miles away. determine what elements are in, right? This is all through the imagination faculty. And he says here that he has discovered that his own brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. And he is beginning now to learn how to make practical use of this discovery. So this is something we'll get into, but we're talking about the brain, right? Through time, we've been able to understand so much about the brain, and this is the first glimpse of the principle of the brain coming into play, where he talks about it as a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. So we'll get into that again at a later chapter. This is, its own chapter in itself in this book. All right, so he talks about a few more examples. Now, he also says here that man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of his imagination. He has not yet reached the apex of development in the use of his imaginative faculty. He has merely discovered that he has an imagination and has commenced to use it in a very elementary way. Okay, so for most people watching this video, you probably understand that yes, you do have an imagination, right? Yes, when you were a kid, you let your imagination run wild, but no one really talks, especially as adults, about okay, how can we use our imagination to get rich? So another thing I want to point out, I really want to emphasize this sentence because it's important for me to know that he says man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of his imagination. Okay, so at the end of the day, right? Like our limit, our true limit comes down to how well developed and how do we use our imagination, right? I've heard this before, and it's definitely something that I really want to understand because the only limit that we place on ourselves are the limits that we place on our imagination. So so what does that mean, right? What does that mean for you? Well, it basically kind of takes the idea of excuses out of the picture, right? Because if I'm making all these excuses, right, in reality, I can do anything that I set my mind to, as long as I can do anything as high as the bar that I set my imagination to. And, this isn't a sentence I should be taken lightly. I'm going to move on from that. Now, now, let me know what you think about that sentence there, whether you truly believe that you can do anything that you really set your mind to, or if that's just, me talking. But let me know what your thoughts are on that. Now, I want to talk about two forms of imagination. Now, he refers to one as the synthetic imagination and the other as the creative imagination. So, the definition that of the synthetic imagination, he says, through this faculty, one may arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. This faculty creates nothing. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. It is the faculty used most by the inventor, with the exception of the genius who draws upon the creative imagination when he cannot solve his problem through synthetic imagination. Okay, let me pause there. So, synthetic imagination, just a quick rundown, right? This is the portion of the imagination we'll be using more often, right? Think about, your past experiences, right? How did you navigate through certain situations? You're going to be using that a little bit more, and you're going to be just editing it. Maybe there's a time where you realize that waking up early, you had a great day from that. And so you're using imagination now, like, to be successful. Like, okay, maybe I can work with waking up early every single day, and just kind of configuring that part of the imagination where you experienced something before and you're just reimagining it, and so to speak. So, let me just clarify too. What we're basically doing, let me reread this, is arranging old concepts, ideas or plans into new combinations. So that's all it is. Old concepts, ideas, and plans. All we're doing is rearranging it with this portion of the imagination. Okay. Now, now the next part of the imagination is the creative imagination. And he says through this faculty of the creative imagination, the finite mind of man has direct communication with infinite intelligence. He says this is the faculty through you may get a hunch or inspiration, right? It is by this faculty that all basic or new ideas are handed over to man. It is through this faculty that thought vibrations from the minds of others are received. Okay, so what does that mean? Because that was pretty bold, that sentence, right? The creative imagination, right? He says the finite mind of man has direct communication to infinite intelligence. Right? Now that is a very bold statement, but I'm going to take it as truth. So he also mentions this where hunches and inspirations are received. Let's see if he says it here. Now I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we're also going to realize that the creative imagination is a synonym, which means the same word as the sixth sense. Okay, so these two go hand in hand, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to the sixth sense in depth. But I want you to know that when you receive just a brand new idea or a hunch or something is telling you in your gut that you want to go through with this, what you are actually using is your creative imagination. Okay, now I also find this interesting. This is a sentence I glance over often, but he says it is through this faculty that one individual may tune in or communicate with the subconscious minds of other men. Okay. Now I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but like that is also a very interesting statement. What does that mean? Through your creative imagination, you can communicate with the subconscious minds of other men. Let me know what you think about that sentence. Okay. So, furthermore, the creative imagination works automatically in the manner described in subsequent pages. This faculty functions only when the conscious mind is vibrating at an exceedingly rapid rate, as for example, when the conscious mind is stimulated through the emotion of a strong desire. Okay, let me pause there. Now, this is interesting. Okay, so I started recently. I know I've been doing these episodes for over 100 episodes now, but recently I started actually following the instructions and getting emotionally involved with my goal every single night. Okay. So I was, doing the instructions, but I wasn't doing them in a certain way. And so finally, I started doing them in this certain way where I truly did read my goal card and feel it already done. Okay. And, at night, I'll go to bed and I noticed that from actually following through with the instructions, my mind get stimulated to a higher level just by actually feeling it, not just saying I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm earning what $100,000 a month in residual income on or before this state, right? That doesn't do it. But when I truly feel like I am, my goal is complete in this moment right now, my goal is complete, right? What that does, or what it does, I can tell you from experience, it stimulated my mind so that I'm at a higher level of thought. This is kind of the definition of a genius, right? Where a genius is someone who can so stimulate his state of mind that he can receive thoughts that he could not receive before at his, your baseline state. So, what do I say this, right? When you have a strong desire, when you have a burning desire, when you follow the instructions in chapter 2, the first step, which is desire, and you actually do read and see and feel your goal card every single night and morning, you can stimulate your mind. And what this is going to do is it's going to help you actually attract thoughts directly from infinite intelligence. And no, I do not mean that statement lightly, right? It's happened to me where I actually have received, just like a hunch or an inspiration at night right before I'm like falling asleep because I've been actually following through with these instructions, and it's legit, right? You can't knock it until you actually try it for yourself. So, so if you want a way to stimulate your mind, you need to have a burning obsession with your goal. Okay, now the creative faculty becomes more alert, more receptive to vibrations from the sources mentioned in proportion to its development through use. Okay, now let me go on a tangent for a sec. Why do I keep reading this chapter or this book over and over and over again? Because every time I read through it, I get to see, okay, how much did I develop my creative imagination? Right? At what level was it when I read it the first time? Here I am in a different uh, space and time and state, right? What am I now understanding now? Like, how well did I develop the creative faculty of my imagination, right? Because some people, everyone has an imagination, but some people just don't use it because it's been burned out of them through the constant repetition of no's that we've heard that, oh, why would you even think that? That doesn't make sense, right? Most people have burned this imagination faculty down so that it's very limited and weak. Now the question is, okay, so how do we develop it? How do you measure yourself on how well you actually have developed, the imaginative faculty that God has given you? So that's a pretty deep question. I'm gonna leave it just at there, but yeah, he even says right after this statement is significant. Ponder over it before passing on. So just notice that I'm gonna pause there, but that's like the key right there, right? Like, oh, you need the answers, right? You need the answers or inspiration. You're just like, God, give me an answer, right? Well, develop your imagination faculty, and you will become better not at getting the answers, but at receiving the answers. that I hope you understand what I'm saying there. Okay, now um, I'm gonna read one last paragraph or two more paragraphs and end it here because this is definitely going to be a two-parter. This imagination. So he finally says, keep in mind as you follow these principles that the entire story of how one may convert desire into money cannot be told in one statement. The story will be complete only when one has mastered, assimilated, and begun to make use of all the principles. Okay, keep in mind as you follow these principles that the entire story of how one may convert desire into money cannot be told in one statement. That's big, right? There's been times where I've gone on live and said, okay, here's the secret in one sentence. That is not possible. I'm not going to be able to explain to you what the secret to Think and Grow Rich is in one sentence or in one statement. He says the story will be complete only when you have mastered and begun to make use of all of the principles. So, are there some principles that you're following? Maybe you do have a burning desire or an obsession with a goal, but you're not applying persistence. You're not applying faith with that, right? Unless you're actually using all these principles, then how exactly are you going to truly accomplish, what this book has set out for you to accomplish? He says the great leaders of business, industry, and finance, and the great artists, musicians, poets, and writers became great because they developed the faculty of creative imagination. Okay, let's pause it there. All right, cool. So tomorrow I'm going to read probably like 4 pages, but they're going to be deep. All right, we're going to be talking about nature and the laws of nature and so on and so forth. So, just wanted to pause it there. What did you learn? What did you like from this section right here? Because this was the imagination, right? Something not many people talk about because, simply put, their imaginations have been burned out, right? Everyone thinks that imagination is something that kids have. I can assure you that some of the most richest men that I've studied had the most incredible, well-developed imaginations. So that's my final thoughts on this. Now, I'm gonna leave it there. I want to say thank you all for watching, and I'll leave you with this until we meet again in time and space. Bye, everybody, for now. See ya.